All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Weekly Rebalance with Ethan Dunbar, myself, and Nick Cargill, where we'll be covering each week the latest market moves, trends, different strategies, and give you insights into what's coming up in the markets as well. We've got an interesting show this week, especially. We're going to be covering in our research of the week section, we're going to be covering the comparison between Powell and Hassett as Fed chairs if they do indeed change here in the coming year. So, anyways, we'll get into that shortly. Welcome back, Nick. How's everything going?
Going well. How was Thanksgiving?
Pretty good. Pretty good. Can't complain. Roasted two turkeys, and it was way too cold, so it took way longer than I expected in the smoker. Sitting outside, I was just kind of waiting for them to be done for about 2 more hours than I thought they were going to take.
Nice. You guys, you fried a turkey last year, right?
We did, yeah. We fried a turkey last year, but smoked it this year.
Did that dangerous thing?
Yes. How about you? What did you do? What did you cook the Thanksgiving turkey?
No. For everyone's sake, I did not cook the Thanksgiving turkey. I watched Olivia prepare her dish and enjoyed the food that was there. We all go over to my parents' house. Everybody's got their assigned dish. I think we don't typically do a full turkey. We do maybe 3 turkey breasts, and then there's a lot of different food that people bring. Like Olivia brings a chicken pot pie. So everybody's got their different thing that they're looking forward to. But I do not cook anything. That's for my sake and everyone else's.
That's funny. Do you have a favorite? So before we get into the podcast, what's your favorite dish? If you had to pick one.
I think we were talking about this on a call last week, or I brought it up, but I'm not a big turkey guy. I don't really like turkey all that much. The ham is really good. I do look forward to the ham. You gotta look forward to that in Virginia.
Yeah. So would ham be your favorite? You'd pick ham?
Probably of the Thanksgiving, the typical Thanksgiving food. Yeah, I would say so.
Go with the ham.
Yeah. What about you?
I think I would probably go with the pumpkin rolls. My family has this pumpkin roll recipe that they're just delicious. You just kind of tear them apart, and I put a bunch of butter on them, which is great for my cholesterol. But just load them up with butter, and it's like a buttery pumpkin. I don't know. It's great.
That does sound good. I'm also not a big pumpkin guy, but
yeah,
certain you mix it in with certain stuff. It's pretty good. But
yeah, well, that's my thing. Anyways, well, let's get into it. So first thing to cover this week, let's go with the update. So what's happened the last week or so since we last talked? I mean, I know the market was closed for a day and a half that it normally would be open, so a little less activity than normal, but still some notable things going on.
For sure. A good week at that too for equities as a whole.
Yeah. Well, I think it was interesting, looking back. So we've obviously had some volatility, then a recovery, right? Looking at equity markets, let's just look at earnings season as a good example. The thing that was interesting to me, probably the biggest thing of note, was we had earnings season come out. Great earnings, right? So the S&P 500, I believe, was about 15% EPS growth. The forecast was for 7, so far outpaced what was expected there. Same thing in the Russell. If you look at small caps, 4.5% EPS growth versus a little less than 3 EPS growth, which is great, right? But the thing that was most encouraging to me for market health was the breadth. Actually, everything other than the Mag 7 finally started to participate. It grew 11.1% EPS growth. That's the first double-digit earnings growth since 2022. So really good health there, and it reflected in the performance. The last month especially, we saw this volatility, and the S&P is kind of flat for the last month, down about 0.5% the last 31 days. But there's different sectors and different styles started to actually perform well. Like our one of our favorite indices to follow, the Dividend Aristocrat Index, which is all companies that have increased dividends for 25 or more years, was actually up almost 2.5% the last month. Which has not been the case the last year. The last number of years, it has significantly lagged the more growth oriented or blend counterpart indices. And that's good sign from my perspective in terms of market health, because we want to see that breadth occur. Breadth being the rest, not just those 7 names driving the index, but the rest of those 493 names in the S&P 500, the rest of the markets, mid cap, small cap, et cetera, actually performing and having positive earnings growth is really, really healthy. So that's good. That's good news in my opinion. What do you think about that, Nick?
Definitely. And it's a trend we've started to see over the past few weeks. I think we've mentioned this on prior calls, but talking about just like you mentioned, the breadth within the market and how that kind of goes both ways sometimes. How we've seen days where actually the majority of the S&P is having a positive day, but the index is down notably. And that's coming from the concentration in a few names that perform poorly in a given day, that sort of thing. So
Right.
uh, we've seen breadth pick up, and it's been interesting to watch that specifically in the context of index returns and the underlying constituent returns, just keeping an eye on that. But yeah, last week in particular, saw a lot of good breadth in the market, and it was all positive. So,
Yes.
and the last earnings season, I think, just like you said, justifies that.
Yeah, totally agree. Totally agree. Well, the other big mover recently is Bitcoin. We've covered this a number of times, but Bitcoin and gold. What are your thoughts on Bitcoin? We've had significant, there's volatility. Bitcoin's always volatile. A lot of cryptos are, that's kind of the standard is they're volatile, but big sell off now. I was looking the Bitcoin gold cross, Bitcoin over gold. So 20, it's right now about 20 times. 20 Bitcoin would buy, you know, that's how many times it's worth over the 1 ounce of gold. And the peak was around 40 when Trump, came into office and Bitcoin peaked 40 times. So we've had a significant reduction, obviously, in pullback in Bitcoin as gold has been stable. Do you think there's more room to fall there, or do we have, a bounce here? We've seen a bounce like the last couple of days, but it's not necessarily enduring yet.
Yeah, I definitely think that it's a reasonable probability that we see more downside from here. I think a lot of people have that opinion as well. I don't think that's unique to us. Just given what we've seen in the past with Bitcoin, it seems like it's not unreasonable to expect a little bit more to the downside from Bitcoin
Yeah,
in this current cycle. I mean, it could certainly rebound from here. I just see it as, if you're going to buy it and hold it for the long term, you're a big believer in Bitcoin and that system, then, maybe it's a good time to buy a tranche. Just get in a little bit and start the DCA if you wanted to get in, and maybe at 120 you were a little bit hesitant. Um, I think it's a reasonable thing to put in a bit of your money, but I don't think I'm screaming this is the bottom and let's pile into Bitcoin right now.
right. Yeah, I agree. I think that, there's technical analysis is probably the easiest way to analyze Bitcoin if you're going to trade it. So not what you were highlighting a good point, Nick. If you're a long-term believer, you just had a decent sized pullback, go ahead and buy, right? Or start buying. But if you are trying to trade it a little bit more tactically, I think that 90,000 level is really key, which we're hovering right around now. If we can get support and stay above 90,000, I think that we could see a bounce back towards maybe not recovering the new highs right away, but bounce back towards those numbers. But if not, from a technical standpoint, I think the support level is more like 50 or 60,000. Probably 50,000 would be my guess if we can't
Definitely.
stay above that 90,000 support level. So we'll see what happens there. A lot of volatility, obviously. Like we said, if you're a buyer long term, might as well buy, right? Just got a big discount. Maybe it goes down further, but if you're a bullish long
Yeah.
term, then who cares, right?
Yep. Totally agree with that. I think it's interesting too, just thinking back on it, on my time working in the industry. I remember when I started out, summer of 2022, shortly thereafter, Bitcoin was trading around $16,000 a coin.
Yeah.
And it had pulled that back from, it was up. I can't remember what level it was at before it pulled back to 16 and then shot back up to 125. But it had gotten up there. I think it was at least above 60,000, probably even more than that.
Yeah.
And we saw it pull back. Really notably, it stayed down there for a while and it came back.
Right.
Just something to keep in mind if you hold any crypto. It's performed great since its inception, but it's a volatile ride.
Right. Well, that great performance includes those major drawdowns. So
It does. Yep.
like this drawdown thus far, going from where it was at its peak. What was the peak again? Somewhere around 125, 130.
Yeah, 125, 130. It was in that range and pulled
So
back.
we go down to below 90, but still that's we still there's a long way to go in
Yeah.
just a normal bear market for crypto.
Yeah.
It's just that's normal, and you're going to experience that if you're a crypto investor. If you're invested in crypto, expect that. Don't be surprised, and just look for opportunities to buy within those downturns, because that's the time when you really can get in and make your profits, is buying when you got the opportunities, when everything's cheaper. So
Yep.
especially if you're a long-term investor, you're going to end up holding it for a long time.
Yep. It just is. It's something important to think about with Bitcoin, because
Yeah.
I think specifically back when I started, you got people who got into Bitcoin at 60, 70,000, bought into the hype at the peak. And now, they're up on that position now, but it's been almost 4 years at this point.
Right.
4 or 5 years. So depending on where you get in, it could take a long time to get back. So
Agreed. Especially when the average drawdown is notably more than that of stocks, and notably more frequent than that of stocks. So the average rate of return is higher on average since Bitcoin's inception, but the swings are notably more wild. So as long as everyone, and I don't think that's a surprise to anybody, but definitely worth reminding.
For sure, it just highlights being disciplined. If you're going to do something like that, be disciplined. Having a DCA strategy or an ongoing buy strategy, following a set like that can really help your returns with an asset like Bitcoin.
Yeah, totally agree. So, well, that kind of covers the market for the last week. Let's move on to what I think is a really interesting topic. The research for the week was on the comparison of Kevin Hassett and Jerome Powell as Fed chair. So, Nick, do you want us walking through, for those that maybe haven't followed this news the last number of weeks, tell us the story on what's unraveling there, and when could we see a change at the Fed chair?
Yeah, so I don't think anyone's going to be surprised that Trump and Powell have kind of been butting heads over the past few years. Well, really since Trump came back into office. And then there was some criticism before that. I think it's funny to think back on it, because it's easy to forget that Trump actually appointed Powell. I often forget that. Just thinking back on it in preparation for this call, I was thinking back and going, I'm pretty sure Trump appointed Powell, but I had to go back and check, because the way they interact right now, you wouldn't think so. But
yeah, agreed.
But anyways, there's been a lot of criticism, and basically we've got a decent probability that Powell, as to the Fed chair, gets replaced here, and likely next year, sometime around. I believe the estimated schedule will be around April, right?
Yeah, I think April or May. I think May might be the first meeting in which, yeah, I think you're right.
but Hassett is one of the front runners. A lot of people believe him to be the front runner for Trump's nomination to replace Powell. And pretty different approaches. We don't know. Well, we do know a decent bit about Hassett. He's just not as much of a public figure as Powell is, just given he's been in the Fed chair position for a while. Hassett definitely tends to side more with Trump than Powell. I think one of the big things, one of the big talking points that you'll likely hear about on mainstream cable, that sort of thing, is just that the independence of the Fed might be a little bit more influenced, or the Fed might be less independent than they have been in the past with Hassett, as opposed to like Powell, who's pretty staunchly staunch in his belief that the Fed needs to remain independent. So that's really the big talking point that I think a lot of people are going to bring up right now.
Yeah. Well, and you look at, look a little bit, let's look a little bit at Powell versus Hassett and their profiles. So Powell, let's just assume that most know Powell, but he's been the Fed chair since Trump appointed him back in his first term and took us all the way through COVID, the inflation spike in 2022, the banking turmoil issues, all of that stuff. So he really has been a champion of Fed independence, and which I think is good. The opposite is of Hassett, that at least accused of being more of a Trump sympathizer, but he's currently the director of the National Economic Council, and I believe he was the former chair of the Council of Economic Advisors. The big thing with him is he's a strong advocate of pro-growth policies and has been pretty aligned, like you said, with Trump on thinking that interest rate policy is significantly higher than it should be. Again, calling into question some of the issues of independence for the Fed, which I don't know. What do you think of that? Do you think, I mean, this is complete conjecture because we're talking about something that hasn't happened and may not even happen, but is, I guess, very possible at this point.
I mean, I think it's an interesting thing to bring up because really, is it that Hassett may be less independent, or does he just have similar beliefs to, Trump? Because
Right.
central bank independence is I think most people would agree is very important. But if you have a Fed chairman who has views that are aligned with the current president, does that necessarily mean that the two aren't independent?
Yes.
That's one
Agreed.
thing to think. Maybe it's not Trump's influence, but maybe it's more of he's just found a person that kind of aligns with his beliefs on how the Fed should be run, and you would expect him to nominate someone that would align with his beliefs.
Right.
So again, going back to he appointed Powell, and maybe at the time, I guess it wasn't as contentious of an issue. I don't think many people were expecting us to go through a rapid hiking cycle and kind of be in the situation that we are right now, just given for many years we had really low interest rates, Yellen's term, and the beginning of Powell's term as well. So I think it's an interesting thing to bring up. I don't know. Questioning the independence of someone versus, maybe their beliefs just align with what Trump believes right now, and you would expect him to nominate someone like that. So I don't know.
Right.
I feel like it might be a little bit unfair to say that it's not independent, but they'll certainly, if that actually goes through, they'll move more in lockstep than Powell and Trump have. That would be my guess.
Agreed. Yes. Well, one of the most interesting differences in it, aside from what we just talked about, is their stance on tariffs and whether they're deflationary or inflationary. Powell is very in the camp of tariffs being inflationary, and Hassett argues that tariffs are deflationary. Now, we've been able to find some research recently that argues tariffs are actually deflationary.
Yep.
We covered that, I believe, a couple of weeks ago. Would you mind reminding everybody on that research that you did and that you found a couple of weeks ago?
Yeah, absolutely. A great paper out of San Francisco Fed, I believe. But basically what they did, they took a look over the past 150 years and tariff shocks throughout that 150 years and the resulting impact on the market. And what they found was historically pretty much with strong statistical significance that when tariffs are introduced or increased, typically we end up with a reduced amount of inflation, or inflation comes down and unemployment goes up. Uh, that's been the trend that's been established over the past few years. And there's a few, um, hypotheses, or what would be the hypothesis? I don't know, plural of hypothesis out there as to why that would be. But typically, the explanation is that it impacts demand more than it does supply, because obviously you've got a pretty clear impact on the supply curve with tariffs. Your supply curve shifts up to the left, so prices go up. But at the same time, the consumer who potentially has less wealth from a shock to the stock market. Stock markets pull back, kind of like we saw back on Liberation Day. We saw stock markets pull back notably. Wealth effect, consumers being a little bit less confident in their spending, outlook for the economy in the future. Potentially that means that consumers pull back their spending, and actually we end up with some deflationary pressures. So a reduction in inflation. So definitely an interesting subject. I guess it probably depends on what time horizon you're looking at. I'd imagine there's elements of both, but it depends on at what period of time you're looking at. It would be my guess, because
Yes.
it certainly seems like both are present to some extent.
Right. Yeah, I agree. We'll have to link that document in the research in the podcast notes here, because I found that to be extremely interesting. And if that is correct, then Hassett would be a great pick. If that opinion is correct and that research is correct, then tariffs are actually deflationary. And having a Fed chair that believes that is probably a positive thing if that is indeed correct. So we'll have to see there, but yeah, very, very interesting read for those who haven't read it. It's worth reading.
It
Definitely
really is.
a different opinion than I think the mainstream coverage has been to this
Yeah,
point.
and you can't really fault anyone for their gut reaction to the introductions of tariffs to expect inflation. Still, we'll see what actually ends up playing out here, but
Right.
just Econ 101, you would expect the supply curve to shift, and that's the behavior you would expect to see. So,
Right. Interesting. Well, yeah, very, very. We'll be sure to link that in the podcast notes because I think that is a good read. How do you plan on adjusting portfolios? How would you think about portfolios differently, or maybe not at all, if Hassett becomes the Fed chair in the first part of next year, first half of next year, versus if Powell is the just stays in place?
yeah, I think we might need to hear a little bit more about Hassett. I mean, I think the gut reaction would be he's going to cut interest rates more rapidly than Powell.
Right.
The end result and where we end up with inflation with that would be a large driver of the decisions that we end up making to reposition the portfolio. I since we're looking pretty far out into the future, we're looking at May 2026. I'd like to have a better read on what inflation's looking like, what unemployment's looking like, and just a better idea of what Hassett is going to do in general. But if he's going to cut rates more rapidly, we'll just assume that typically adds some pressure to inflation, some upward pressure to inflation. So let's say we have deflationary pressure from the tariffs. We've got inflationary pressure from rates coming down.
Right.
Those two things are offsetting each other. In our fixed income portfolio right now, we have our duration target a little bit less than a year beyond that of the ag. I feel like as long as inflation can remain in check, and that would be something to be gauged at that point in time, I still like our duration target where it is.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think that's right. How would you so that kind of answers the fixed income question. How would you handle equities? Would you alter your opinion on equity portfolios and shift more? Because we've been pretty strong advocates of looking for value, looking for breadth to start to spread out to the rest of the market. Would you change your opinion and go more towards growth-oriented companies in the first part of next year if we were going to see likely significantly lower interest rates?
Yeah, potentially. I think another thing to be looking at would be small
Yeah,
cap equities. That's kind of a clear one. But yeah, I think I'd be looking at growth companies, small cap equities. It would be a decent place to be looking, assuming we're going to have more aggressive Fed rate cuts than we're getting right now. I would also
right.
assume that their neutral rate, Hassett's neutral rate target is less than that of Powell's.
Yeah, yeah, probably so.
So those two things, growth companies, small cap companies, would seem to be a good place
Should be good.
to go.
Yeah. Well, we'll have to. That is pretty far into the future in reality. And when you're talking about stock markets and how quickly things can move, we're talking about. I think it's May is the first meeting that you could have Powell replaced with Hassett. So you're talking about 6 Fed meetings from now. So a lot can unfold in the next six months. But something we'll want to be covering and paying close attention to over the next 5 or 6 months as things develop. So.
Absolutely.
Oh, anyways, okay, so that kind of wraps up our research of the week. Last thing, trivia. I have a couple questions Fed related for you, Nick. I know you said you got at least one for me. So, who wants
Yeah,
to go first?
it doesn't matter to me. Doesn't matter
Let's.
to me.
How many questions do you have this week?
Um, I'll have two.
Okay, I'll go first then, since I've got 3.
Okay.
The I'll go first. We'll rotate. How about that?
Okay. All right.
All right. We'll see if we have the same question too. That'll be interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm wondering if we might. I know you're not going to have one in
All right. In what year was the Federal Reserve System established?
mind. 19. It's got to be around 1910, right?
Yep. Close.
1914.
Oh, that was close. 1913. 1913.
Oh. I feel like I had a little bit of an unfair advantage on that one because I was looking at a chart of the former Fed shares since its inception.
Yes, gotcha.
But
That's pretty good though. Yeah, early 1900s, 1913 to be specific. All
wow,
right.
yeah, it's kind of funny to think about how, in the whole scheme of things, how short a time period that is.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Not very long. 100 years, a little more than 100 years.
Yeah, also think about how that job has changed. I was thinking about this today. Jerome Powell has to be the most memed Fed chair in all of history.
Probably. I mean, he
Not
has to be,
necessarily.
obviously.
Yeah, I mean, not necessarily because of his policies or anything like that. Just because of the nature of his tenure as the Fed chair. And
Yeah.
I love a good Jerome Powell meme every now and then.
Absolutely. Me too.
Well, I tell you what. Let's do let's do this. This one I feel like is a stretch. I definitely want to get this one because I can't really name that many Fed chairs other than like Greenspan, Yellen, Powell. But
Yeah.
which Fed chair had the longest tenure?
Yeah. Boy, I'm not sure. It's not Greenspan.
No.
It's not any of those 3 that you mentioned, which are the 3 that I would be able to name, off the top of my head. So I'm not sure.
Yep. Okay. I would have never gotten this one. Have never heard of this guy. Not that I'm sure that he did a lot of great work. I just, you know, I don't have a long list of Fed chairs off the top of my head.
Yeah.
It was William McChesney Martin Jr. He
Okay.
served on as the Fed chair from 1951 to 1970. So followed by Greenspan.
Wow. Wow. Almost 20 years.
Well, actually, Greenspan wasn't immediately after, but that's fine.
Yeah. 20 years.
Anyways,
That's a long term.
that is a long term. That's also I feel like that's a very underappreciated position.
Yeah,
That has to be one of the worst jobs on the planet.
I know. Yeah, I don't think I'd ever want that job. Of course, yeah, I'm sure it's an honor, but I don't think I'd ever want that job.
Oh no, it's certainly an honor. Yeah, it is without a doubt a public service to
Yeah,
perform that role.
yes, it is.
Yeah, no doubt.
Absolutely. Well, speaking of different Fed chairs and their length of terms, since the Fed was founded, since the Federal Reserve was founded in 1913, how many different individuals have served as Fed chair?
Ooh, um, this is a total guess. I'm going to guess 11.
That's a decent guess. It's not yeah, it was actually it's a little bit more than that, but it was still less than I thought. 16.
16.
16 Fed chairs. Yep.
Wow,
Not all that many though.
that's not.
Yeah, not all that many.
That's really surprising.
16 Fed chairs. That's two of my three questions. My third one's a boring one, so hopefully I can get this. Is this your next one, the one that I actually have a chance at?
You might have a chance at this one. All right, My last one is like really fun though.
Okay.
I think it's really fun. So do you want to? We'll do two in a row from you, and then we'll finish out on
That works for me because
on
mine's
the
boring.
silly one that I have.
That makes sense. Mine's boring because this is probably pretty. I don't know. Maybe it's too obvious, but what committee within the Federal Reserve actually sets the federal funds rate, the actual key interest rate for the economy?
The Board of Governors, right?
It's technically the FOMC, the Federal Open Market Committee. That's the.
Yeah. Okay.
It's almost too obvious.
Yeah, I gotcha. Yeah, Fed Open Market Committee. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, kind of a boring one. So that wraps up my question. So I'm excited. I'm excited for this one.
All right. All right. I think you might get this one because there was a lot of news coverage about this a while ago. What is Jerome Powell's favorite band?
His favorite band?
His favorite band. This was a big news story.
Really?
He got asked about it in one of his speeches after a rate cut, I think.
That's funny.
Or it was a large speech and he got asked about.
Really? I missed that. So I'm going to be totally guessing here. So
I want to hear a guess though.
Yeah, I'm going to try to think of his kind of type of personality. What is his favorite band? Is it also like a singer? It's an actual band.
It's a band. I use band for a reason.
For a good reason. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm gonna guess I think it's gonna be something funny that I wouldn't fit with his personality. Actually, I'm gonna guess the Beach Boys.
The Beach Boys. That would be a really good one. I like that. It's not the Beach Boys, but it's kind of close. Is
it the Beatles?
It's the Grateful Dead.
Oh, really? Interesting.
Yeah, he's a Deadhead.
Interesting.
Pretty die hard.
I did not know that. He actually that came out in one of his speeches.
Yeah, it did because what happened was he was spotted at a Grateful Dead concert.
Really?
Like he was just there, and somebody took a picture of him and memed him. You know, he's at a Grateful Dead concert, and it came up later. Somebody asked him about it. I think he might have been being interviewed by Congress or something. One of the lawmakers, I think, asked him a question about being a Grateful Dead fan.
Yeah.
And he said yes. And then it's something that came up in interviews in the past. But yes, big Grateful Dead fan. I think it's funny. I think Jerome Powell also played guitar in a rock band that covered some Grateful Dead stuff. I haven't seen as much confirmation on that, but I do know his favorite band is the Grateful Dead.
Grateful Dead. Interesting. That's cool. Well, I did not know that. You learn something new every day.
Yes.
Awesome. Well, any closing thoughts from you, Nick, or should we wrap it up for the week?
No, I think that covers it.
All right. Well, thanks everybody. Thanks for tuning in. We'll be back next week with more market news and some more research for the week. So until then, have a good week and we'll talk to everybody later.